Hello, pre-algebra students. This is chapter 4.3, equivalent fractions. As you likely already know well, a fraction is any number in the form a, b, where a is the numerator and b is the denominator. B cannot ever be equal to 0. Two fractions that represent the same number are called equivalent fractions. An example of an equivalent fraction would be 1/3 and 2/6. These each represent the exact same quantity when drawn on a number line. For example, we could graph 1/3 like this, and 2/6 would fall in the same place. Sorry, I ran out of room. So we can see that they're at exactly the same spot on the number line. They are equivalent. To write equivalent fractions, we can multiply or divide the numerator and the denominator by the same non-zero number. For example, if we took 1/4 and multiplied the numerator by 2 and the denominator by 2, we get an equivalent fraction. Algebraically, we would write that as a over b is the same thing as a times c and b times c. Or a over b is the same as a divided by c over b divided by c. The one thing that we must always be careful of, though, is that b cannot equal 0 and c cannot equal 0, because we can't end up with a 0 in our denominator for any reason. Let's go on to trying a few of these with fractions from the book. Let's write two fractions that are equivalent to 8/12. First, let's multiply. Let's say we're going to multiply 8 and 12 each by 3 to find an equivalent fraction. That would be 24/36. Now let's divide. We need to choose a number by which both 8 and 12 are divisible. I'm going to pick 4, because our fractions have to have whole numbers. And that will be 2/3, 2/3. So the fractions 24/36 and 2/3 are equivalent to 8/12. They all represent the same quantity. For these four problems, write two fractions that are equivalent to the given fraction. You'll find the first by multiplying and the second by dividing. Please go ahead and record this in your notebook. Press pause while you work. Now let's talk about simplest form. A fraction is in simplest form when its numerator and its denominator are relatively prime. To write a fraction in simplest form, divide the numerator and the denominator by their greatest common factor. For example, 12/30. 12 and 30 share a common factor other than 1, so they are not relatively prime. We can simplify this fraction. We'll begin by finding the greatest common factor, using the techniques we learned in the last lesson. So the prime factorization of 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. The prime factorization of 30 is 2 times 3 times 5. Therefore, our greatest common factor will be 2 times 3, or 6. So now we can go back to our fraction, 12/30, and divide both the numerator and the denominator by 6, giving us an answer of 2/5. 2/5 is equivalent to 12/30, but 2/5 is the simplest form. Let's simplify a fraction from a word problem. This map shows the 48 contiguous states in the United States. By the way, the word contiguous means connected without a break. Of the 48 contiguous states, 21 are coastal states. These states border with the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, or the Gulf of Mexico. Write the fraction in simplest form of the contiguous states that are coastal states. So that'll be 21 out of 48. So let's begin by writing the prime factorization of each number. 21's prime factorization will be 3 times 7. So 21 equals 3 times 7. Now let's prime factor 48. So we'll get 2 and 24, 2 and 12, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. So 48's prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So the only common prime factor we have is 3. So let's divide both 21 and 48 by 3. That's our greatest common factor. So 21 divided by 3 is 7. 48 divided by 3 is 16. And there's our answer. 7/16 of the contiguous states are coastal. Now, working on your own, write these 4 fractions in their simplest form. To simplify fractions that contain variables, we factor the numerator and the denominator. Then we divide out common factors. We should assume that any variable in the denominator of a fraction is not equal to 0. For example, x in our denominator would not be equal to 0. So let's try this. If we have a variable fraction that says 10xy over 15y squared, we would simplify this fraction by first factoring it. 10 times x times y over 15 times y times y. Wait, I'm not done factoring, am I? I didn't factor 10 and 15. So 10 would be 2 times 5 times x times y. And 15 would be 3 times 5 times y times y. Now we divide out common factors. So we can eliminate these y's, we can eliminate these 5's. And our final simplified fraction will be 2x over 3y. All right, folks, that's all for today. Short and sweet. When I see you tomorrow for chapter 4.4, we'll learn about least common multiples. Have a great night.